When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. My sin, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, with my soul, it is well, it is well with my
In 1871, the Great Chicago Fire virtually ruined Horatio Spafford. It was almost the biggest trial of his life, but not the biggest. 2 years later, 1873, he puts his wife and his 4 daughters on a ship to sail for England, and the ship runs into another ship and sinks very quickly, and all 4 girls died, and his wife barely escapes. He hears about the accident and he receives a telegram from his wife, saved, alone. He gets on a ship and heads to be with his grieving wife, and as he passes over the part of the ocean where the girls went down and were at the bottom, he wrote, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, or sorrows like sea billows roll." And you can hear the point. When sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, you have taught me to say, it is well with my soul. So the question is, how could it be well? And he goes on in the song and he talks about, let this blessed assurance control that God has regarded my helpless estate and Christ has shed his own blood for my soul. He knew Christ loved him. He saw it in the cross. And when he gets to the end, he has Christ coming back with a great triumph, not to judge him, but to save him and to raise his daughters from the dead. So it is well with my soul. No song quite gets it in terms of its cadence and its tune, and especially its words. It doesn't get any better than sorrowful yet always rejoicing through it is well with my soul.
Oh Lord, haste the day shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as the scroll. The trumps shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul, with my soul, with my soul, with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed that song and the message there that's in that song as well. Today we're going to look at the Retribution Principle, and we're going to get a little theological, a little nerdy, but I think this is especially important as it applies not only to the wisdom literature found in the scriptures, but as it applies to the situation going around us right now. Schools having to go to online education, entertainment, by and large in America, we're an entertainment-driven culture, and entertainment is having to be put to a stop, whether it's sports or the arts or cruise lines or vacations. They're having to be canceled. We had to cancel our vacations. Not very pleasant, but what does this all mean? Is it God's judgment on America? And there you go. When you get into national judgment, it gets even more sticky. But today, when we look at the Retribution Principle, we're going to look specifically at the lives of individuals. How does God act towards us as individuals? So let's get right into this today. What is the Retribution Principle? When we think about the word retribution, what we're talking about is basically getting what you deserve. In the book of Moses, often referred to as the law, the Torah is translated oftentimes as the law. There includes over 600 laws that are interwoven with narratives in between. Deuteronomy 27 through 28, also I believe Leviticus 26, contains the blessings for obedience and the curses for disobedience. So you have the blessings being pronounced from Mount Gerizim, as if you obey this covenant, Israel, these are the good things that are going to happen to you. However, if you disobey, these are the curses that you will have to endure. So, in the mind of the Israelites, this sets up the retribution principle. You do good, you get good. You do bad, you get bad. So conforming to God's expectations is rewarded, and violating His commands brings punishment, which is affirmed in general in the Psalms and the Proverbs. So let's flip over to the book of Job and see how his book sheds a light in this situation. As you know, most of you know the story of Job. It starts out with a very righteous man, very well off. The Lord has certainly blessed him in a lot of ways. And so Satan comes to God and says, hey, the only reason this guy is so righteous and upholding your ways is because of all this stuff that you've given him. You take away this stuff, you take away his wealth, and he's not going to bless you. And the next accusation is you take away his health, and he's not going to bless you. So Satan wins, by the way, when you buy into the health and wealth gospel. So the three friends come to Job after he loses everything. And they increasingly, as the book goes on, antagonize their friend after this huge loss. They don't only affirm that the retribution principle is true, they also affirm what's called a deduced corollary. That is, that those who prosper must be righteous, and those who suffer must be wicked. Right? So if you see someone who is suffering, obviously the retribution principle, it had to have worked on that person right. Therefore they must have sinned for the retribution principle to work. Is not God just? And these are the kind of proverbial wisdom that these friends are approaching Job with. So it must be noted, however, that the deduced corollary is never purported as a truth in Scripture. However, it does become the basis of the friends' accusations against Job. So this is basically their accusation here. If the retribution principle and its corollary are both true, and God is just, then Job must be guilty of some heinous crime. As the dialogue proceeds, however, Job generally affirms the retribution principle and its corollary. He doesn't deny those things. Since, however, he's insistent that he's done nothing wrong, he's forced to look on God's justice with some suspicion. So if we back up just for a second, you look at that bottom point down here, right? These are all the things that are considered true. Retribution principle, corollary, God's justice. Okay? So if Job is upholding these two and his innocence, okay, so he doesn't believe he's committed any crime, then the only thing on this list that can be false or wrong or faulty or misguided, however you want to put it, is God's justice. And that's what that's what Job wants to do with God. He wants to put God in the dock, so to speak. Put him as the defendant in this case. The fact that Job is unwilling to confess falsely, and I think this is really key. Job, think about the pagan deities that are going on around them, right? They're not like the God of the Bible. They're more like glorified humans who one day they might be happy with you, the next day they might be angry with you for no apparent reason. And so the people around them had to live in constant fear to appease these deities. That's not the case with the God of the Bible. And we see this with Job as well. He doesn't feel like he needs to repent needlessly or have some sort of false confession in order to appease some capricious deity. That's not Job's perspective as well. It also upholds the fact that his righteousness is true. And his righteousness is not interested in the blessings that are being received. So that sets up the problem even further, right, about God's justice. The traditional wisdom of Job's friends and even himself, that the retribution principle is inefficient, of the retribution principle, it's inefficient to meet the challenge of the complexity of Job's situation. There's no way out with the retribution principle. We've got to find a different way to solve this problem. So, here's Job 38:25 through 37. It says, "Who has cleft a channel for the torrents of rain and a way for the thunderbolt to bring rain on a land where no man is, on the desert in which there is no man, to satisfy the waste and desolate land, and to make the ground sprout with grass. So when you think about that, the desert getting rain, no one's living there. What's the point of that? Well, what it shows us is that the natural order, and by the way, I didn't make that clear before, but this is God here speaking to Job, okay, where he tells him to dress yourself like a man, prepare yourself for action. And he begins to question him, right? Because Job's plan was to make God the defendant. Job was going to ask all the questions. Well, God turns that around completely. He begins to ask Job the questions. And here we see the natural order of things was not established on the retribution principle. Otherwise, why is this rain going in the desert where no one is? It's not an operational foundation like the law of gravity. Well, as far as we know what the law of gravity is. When the principle operates, it is indicative of God's sovereignty. However, nature was not designed to automatically enforce this principle. It's not. When you think about who rules us, and this is the point of this literature, we're not ruled by a principle. We're ruled by a person. We're not ruled by some impersonal force that's out there that we've got to obey to its whim. No, we're ruled by a person. Someone who acts independently, who has a will, who has desires. That's the personal nature of our God. Very distinct in its form from other theologies, other religions. It's a personal God we serve. It's not deism. It's not karma. Very different. So the causes of suffering cannot be consistently or accurately deduced. And no one has sufficient wisdom to call God's justice into question. Right? Think about it like this. If the clock that I have on the wall, it breaks. And it starts going in reverse. The hands start moving counterclockwise. My son, 8 years old, he can look at that and he can say, that clock is wrong. It's going the wrong way. And I could take the clock, open up the back, show him all the gears, and say, okay, why don't you tell me how all these gears fit together? Why don't you tell me how you can fix this? And this is the same way that it is when Job was questioning God. God brings back to him and says, well, you tell me, since you know so much, how to make this justice work the best in your eyes, O Job. Because that's ultimately Job's accusation, is that God's not a good enough ruler. We need someone better. We need someone who can apply this retribution principle in a much better way. The Psalms offer us another caveat on the retribution principle, which dealt with the lack of the retribution principle. Here's a verse for you, Psalm 73:3. For I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. We see the problem there with the psalmist. He sees the wicked prosper. That's not how it's supposed to be. Well, how did the psalmist solve this? He looked at the eschatological, that is the end times judgment, to solve this. That is, that the violations of the retribution principle, or God's judgment, in this life will be dealt with in the afterlife. This is part of the problem with annihilationism. The idea that at the end of times, God will just annihilate everyone who isn't saved, where they don't have to suffer or anything like that. This is also the problem with universalism, that after death everyone just automatically gets saved. Where's the sense of justice there? The hope of the psalmist, rather, is that if justice is not met in this life, certainly justice will be met in the afterlife. Here's Psalm 37, 10 through 13. In just a little while, the wicked will be no more. Though you look carefully at his place, he will not be there. But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant peace. You see that reflected in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. The wicked plots against the righteous and gnashes his teeth at him, but the Lord laughs at the wicked. Why? This is important. Why does the Lord laugh at the wicked? For he sees that his day is coming. So, one last thing on this video, we're going to look at the proverbial blessings. Proverbs helps us to better define the goals of obedience. So, what do I mean by that? Why is it that we obey? What do we get for our obedience? Now, you see the blessings for obedience listed in Deuteronomy 26 and Deuteronomy 27 and 28. Those seem mainly material, right? This is a very agricultural society. Proverbs kind of shifts the focus a little bit. Not that material things are excluded. Okay, this is still going to include those material things. However, listen to Proverbs 16:16. How much better to get wisdom than gold. To get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. And here's Proverbs 21:21. Whoever pursues righteousness and kindness will find life, righteousness, and honor. So this wisdom literature seems to redefine for us what blessings we're looking for. No longer is it just material things, but the blessings promised to us are character traits, changing us to be more like Christ. And we'll conclude there for today. Think about these things. Think about the retribution principle. Think about what is it that we deserve. Are we getting what we deserve? How is it that God operates? Is God just in the way that he operates, or is he unjust? And we'll look at those issues in the next video.